This is Jonathan Cahn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. When you look at what's happening in the world, it's easy to wonder what's going on, and are things out of control? Is this what the Bible foretold? Is the end near? What do I need to know about the future? Where's it all going? How can I be prepared? What is God's prophetic word for the hour and for me? On this channel, you're going to find prophetic updates, the mysteries of God, daily words for life, biblical revelation, prophetic teachings, and much more. I pray it's going to be a great blessing to you in the days ahead. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time there's a new video that's posted. Leave a comment as to how God is blessing you. And don't forget to share these videos with friends who need to hear them. Thanks again, and God bless you. Shalom.
There are moments in life that appear ordinary, uneventful. Days that begin with the routine, coffee in hand, plans in motion, calendars filled, but then heaven speaks, a divine interruption, a whisper so deep it shakes the foundation of your comfort. And in that moment, everything changes. This is one of those days, a day not marked by the world's calendar, but by the calendar of God. The 19th of June, 2025, is not just another day, it is a divine appointment, a sacred encounter, a moment when heaven delivers an unexpected message for the chosen ones. The message today is not wrapped in the thunder of Sinai or the fire of Pentecost. It comes like a still, small voice, yet it carries the weight of destiny. It is unexpected, not because God is unpredictable, but because He is sovereign. And when heaven speaks unexpectedly, it is often to awaken what has long been asleep. The word is this: heaven is breaking silence. What has been delayed is not denied. What has been hidden will now be revealed. What has been refined in darkness will emerge in glory. Look around you. Revivals are stirring in unexpected places. Testimonies are emerging of people who were overlooked but suddenly elevated. Ministries that were quiet are now exploding. Businesses built in faith are suddenly flourishing. Why? Because the hidden season is over. So what should you do? Stay sensitive to divine interruptions. God will speak when you least expect it. Be listening. Don't despise the delay. It's building you for greater glory. Cut ties with the old mindset. You can't walk into new glory with old thinking. Sanctify your expectation. Don't just hope vaguely. Believe with precision. Get ready to move. When God opens the door, don't hesitate. There are times when everything feels predictable. You wake up, go through your day, and fall asleep, caught in a rhythm that seems endless. But the chosen ones must understand, just because life feels silent doesn't mean heaven is inactive. Divine moments often begin in the middle of the mundane. The greatest visitations don't always arrive with a trumpet blast, but in the stillness of ordinary days. God specializes in choosing unlikely moments to deliver eternal messages. Think of Moses standing alone in the wilderness, tending sheep. The man who once walked the courts of Pharaoh was now surrounded by nothing but silence. No miracles, no signs, just the sound of footsteps in the sand and the bleating of sheep. It felt like a forgotten season, but suddenly a bush caught fire, not consumed, but burning with the presence of the Almighty. That ordinary ground became holy because heaven broke the silence. The ones chosen by God must be ready for such moments. When heaven chooses to interrupt the schedule of man, it's not to inconvenience, it's to awaken. God doesn't operate according to human routines. He overrides them to birth something eternal. And often, when you're least expecting it, that's when He steps in. That interruption isn't random. It's an appointment. It's not a detour. It's divine direction. Look through the Word. God rarely announces His moves on man's timeline. Noah wasn't building an ark after raindrops began to fall. He was building it under blue skies. Samuel wasn't expecting the voice of the Lord as a young boy, but he heard it in the quiet of the night. Heaven invades earth in the moments we least expect and often least desire. It's in the interruptions that destinies are rewritten. But why does God move this way? Because if He came when we expected Him, we try to control the outcome. We'd script His miracles and box in His power. But God isn't limited by expectation. He surprises because it reveals the heart. Those who are chosen are not just marked by what they do in the spotlight, but how they respond in the silence. Sometimes He allows your routine to stretch long, so when the divine moment comes, it shocks your system. He waits until you've let go of striving so you can hear His whisper. The interruption isn't punishment. It's an act of mercy. It breaks the pattern so heaven can establish a new one. You thought you were abandoned, but you were being set up. You thought you were overlooked, but heaven was preparing a dramatic entrance. And what about divine patterns? God has always worked through sudden turns. Abraham was settled in the land of his fathers, building his life in a familiar place until a divine call shattered his comfort. Leave, the voice said, to a land I will show you. No map, no destination, just a call. That's how God moves. Divine interruptions look like inconvenience at first glance, but in the kingdom they are always invitations. Invitations to step out of what's known into what's divine. Joseph was sold by his brothers, thrown into a pit, and imprisoned, all unexpected, all undesired. But in each disruption, God was writing a deeper story, one that could not be seen from the surface, but would only be revealed in the fullness of time. The same was true with David. He was never invited to the anointing ceremony, never considered by his own father, but God interrupted the logic of men and brought the prophet to anoint the forgotten shepherd. Heaven doesn't choose based on man's order. It establishes its own. Heaven's interruption became David's promotion. And look at Mary, a young woman, engaged, planning for her future. Then an angel appears, saying her life would no longer be what she thought. It would be greater, more glorious, but also more painful, more misunderstood. Divine interruptions bring glory, but they also bring a cost, and only the chosen ones are willing to carry it. Heaven interrupts not to ruin your plans, but to fulfill His. Not to take something from you, but to give you something you didn't know to ask for. Your routine is being shaken, not because God is absent, but because He is closer than ever. When nothing seems to be moving in your life, that's often when God is arranging everything behind the veil. Every divine interruption begins with a shaking, a question, a silence broken by a whisper. And those who are watching, those who are listening, will recognize it when it comes. Delay is one of the most painful experiences in the life of the chosen. It carries with it confusion, discouragement, and even questions that echo in the silence of heaven. Why hasn't it happened yet? Did I miss God's timing? Is He still listening? But the ones who are marked by God must come to understand what looks like delay is often a disguise for divine preparation. If God moved at the speed of your expectations, you would arrive at your calling unready. Your already quick conception would have been unready. You would be placed in a position of visibility without the internal strength to carry the weight of glory. And so He hides you. He doesn't withhold the promise. He hides you with it. Just as a seed is buried in the soil, not lost, not dead, but in process, God does not work according to earthly deadlines. He is not rushed by public opinion, nor delayed by earthly conditions. In His timing, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as to the human eye, it may seem that nothing is changing, but in the realm of the Spirit, things are being aligned, reordered, and refined. Consider Joseph, dreams given in his youth, yet years passed in pits and prisons. Every delay looked like rejection, but in heaven's economy, every delay was an appointment with transformation. The pride of the young man had to be broken. The character of the ruler had to be formed. God doesn't just anoint a dreamer, He builds a deliverer. It is in the delay that pride dies, that hidden wounds are healed, that idols are revealed and removed. It is where you learn to trust without sight, worship without results, and follow without confirmation. God trains His generals in silence. He refines His prophets in obscurity. He doesn't rush the process, because what He is building in you must be able to endure once the doors open. In the wilderness, Israel was delayed, not because of distance, it was a short journey, but because of disobedience and the need for transformation. They came out of Egypt quickly, but Egypt had not yet come out of them. The wilderness wasn't a mistake, it was a necessity. In that dry place, they learned what it meant to rely not on Pharaoh, but on Yahweh. This is the hidden purpose behind your waiting. You are not being punished, you are being prepared. You are not being overlooked, you are being developed. What he is doing in secret will one day be shouted from the rooftops, but until then you must stay faithful in the shadows. Refinement doesn't look glorious. It is hot, it is lonely, it is uncomfortable, but it is holy, it is sacred. God places his chosen ones in the fire, not to burn them, but to purify them. The dross must be removed, the impurities brought to the surface, and only fire can do that. Think of Daniel. Before he was promoted, he was tested in the lion's den. Before the Hebrew boys were elevated, they walked through flames. Before Jesus stepped into public ministry, he was driven into the wilderness. Each one refined, each one proven, and each one emerged with the power of heaven resting on them. You cannot walk in supernatural authority without supernatural crushing. You cannot carry the fragrance of heaven unless you've been pressed like oil. The crushing doesn't come to destroy, but to release what is hidden within. Olive oil only flows when the olive is crushed. And so it is with the anointing on your life. God has not forgotten what he said to you. The vision you received was not a fantasy. The calling was not your imagination. But before he brings you into the fulfillment, he will test your posture in the delay. Will you worship while waiting? Will you serve without recognition? Will you believe without evidence? The delay is the place where many give up, where many trade destiny for comfort. But the chosen ones, those who carry heaven's mark, know that waiting is part of the process. They know that God doesn't waste time. Every second in the wilderness is shaping them for the weight of glory that is coming. You're not being ignored. You're being infused with strength. You're not stuck. You're being stretched. And though you may not see the outcome yet, you must believe that something is forming in the unseen. Heaven does its best work in the secret place. And when the time is right, the refining will end, and what has been prepared in silence will roar in public. There are seasons when life feels like it's been turned upside down. People walk out, relationships shift, opportunities dissolve, plans that once seemed certain fall apart before your eyes. And while it may seem like chaos, there is a greater hand at work, rearranging, realigning, and restoring for something far more glorious than you had planned. The hand of God does not waste movement. Every divine removal is making room for divine increase. You thought the closed doors were punishment, but they were protection. What you called a loss, heaven called a rescue. What felt like delay was divine editing. When God begins to move things around, it often doesn't make sense in the moment, but he sees the end from the beginning. What feels like confusion to you is coordination from above. He removed some people not because they were bad, but because they couldn't go where you are going. Some were seasonal scaffolding, meant only to support the structure until the building was ready. When scaffolding is removed, it doesn't mean something is falling apart. It means construction is nearing completion. God will disconnect you from the wrong alignments to connect you with the right destiny. Everything God allows, he uses. The betrayal you faced wasn't the end. It was the beginning of your unveiling. Like Judas at the Last Supper, some are allowed to sit at your table only long enough to trigger your transition. Heaven rearranges when elevation is near. You thought the story was unraveling, but it was being rewritten. A better version, a higher purpose, a greater glory. He's rearranging your heart too. The disappointment, the breaking, the silence. They've been used to purge out pride, fear, and dependence on man. He's been stripping away the false supports so that only his spirit holds you up. You're being repositioned. Your inner life is being strengthened because the external release is almost here. And when the rearrangement is complete, there's a shift that takes place, a divine turning. You wake up one day and everything feels different. The atmosphere shifts. Doors that were shut begin to unlock. Invitations start to come from unexpected places. Favor locates you without striving. It doesn't happen gradually, it happens suddenly. He is the God of the suddenly. What he builds slowly, he releases suddenly. You spend years in preparation and then everything shifts in a moment. One encounter changes everything. One conversation opens a gate. One yes from heaven reverses years of sorrow. And those who have endured the fire and waited in obedience are the ones who recognize the moment when it comes. Scripture is filled with suddenlies. Paul and Silas were in prison, not just locked up physically, but locked down by circumstance. Yet at midnight, in the darkest hour, as they worshiped, a shaking came, not gradually, not subtly, suddenly. The chains fell off, the doors flung open, not just for them, but for everyone around them. Suddenly is not just about speed, it's about divine timing. It's the moment when what was once invisible becomes undeniable. It's when what you've been carrying privately manifests publicly. It's when your tears are answered, your waiting is rewarded, and your wilderness gives way to the promise. But only those who endure the silence can walk into the suddenly. Suddenly doesn't mean randomly. It is the culmination of obedience, endurance, and unseen faithfulness. It's the harvest for every seed you sowed when no one was watching. It's the reward for choosing purity over compromise, faith over fear, obedience over convenience. God does not forget the faithful. He honors those who worship through storms, serve in obscurity, and give when they have little left. He marks the midnight cries, the secret prayers, the silent battles. And when the season shifts, he does not need man's permission to elevate. He doesn't need a platform, a sponsor, or a network. When he says now, everything aligns. That's why you've been feeling pressure. That's why things have seemed tight, intense, and even unfamiliar. Labor pains always precede sudden births. When a woman carries a child for 9 months, everything appears quiet. But when the time is right, the pain increases, the pressure intensifies, and then, in a moment, the baby is born. Suddenly, what you've been carrying is coming to the surface. The promise is crowning. The preparation is over. What heaven has been arranging behind the veil is about to be revealed. And when the door opens, it will not creak. It will burst open with the sound of fulfillment. Not a whisper, but a roar. Not a trickle, but a flood. And it will be known that the hand of the Lord has done this. So now, chosen one, lift up your eyes, not to the chaos, not to the silence, not to the delay, but to the hills from whence comes your, because heaven has spoken. The shaking was not your end, it was your beginning. The breaking was not your burial, it was your birthing. You have been rearranged, refined, and realigned, not for survival, but for revival. What you thought was being stripped away was actually God making room. What seemed like a setback was heaven preparing a stage. Now is the time. The hidden season is ending. The appointed hour has come. The trumpet may not sound from the mountaintop, but the Spirit is sounding it in your spirit. Rise, move, advance. The door is open. Walk through it. You are not stepping into what you deserve. You are stepping into what you are destined for. The earth may not recognize your name, but heaven has always known it. And when heaven opens a door, no man, no demon, no delay can shut it. Go forth, not in fear, not in doubt, but in fire. For the message from heaven has come. The rearranging is finished. The refining is complete. And the suddenly is now.